All right, this is a special edition of Up and Adam. We are going live to the press conference that Ian Parkinson is doing at the SLO County Sheriff's Office. We didn't cover at the beginning because, look, we had an exclusive interview with him, and it was very much a lot like he gave us this audience exclusively a day ago. So, but the questions, this is where it's going to get really interesting and very much in real time because this search is happening in real time. And we're going to the questions right now. Perfect. Let's do it.
Okay. I think I'm going to open it up to questions, but I'll say it one more time. You're going to get a lot of no comments on some of this stuff because I can. So
Thursday morning, an interview you did with a local radio host / podcaster was dropped. It was called an exclusive interview after a lot of local media was told we weren't going to get anything from you guys.
Come on.
What do you have to respond about that, and why was that given to him?
Oh, come on.
Well, as you know, being in the media, that I don't have a responsibility to do any interviews, and my intention was not to do any interviews. That was the message I gave to our PIO, Adamm Montiel, who I happen to know, called me, caught me at a time that I was actually available, and I agreed to talk to him. If you've listened to it, it was very, very benign, and it was about following what we had already put out in a press release. So the short answer is I chose to do it.
Thank you. Yes.
What new evidence prompted the search warrant?
I'll just say it was investigative and scientific.
The first question's going to be about this? About us? Come on.
Sure, Parkinson. Can you explain some of the process or what exactly the soil scientists are doing? Because it's been very visible, as we've all seen. Can you just go a little bit more into detail on what they're looking for?
Well, I'm not a scientist, so I don't want to stumble. Other than the simple explanation is they put probes into the ground to read the soil under the ground. They take that back to the lab. They analyze what components are in that soil, and because the readings that they identify as strong in possessing human DNA, that's what helps them conclude that they think there might be something there or was there.
And to follow on that, is there a timeline on when you'll get results?
We're getting results a little bit day by day. It's a long process to analyze the soil. We have a local lab. They're the people that are actually analyzing it. So they've been analyzing every night since we've been there. So throughout the night, they put it in their test machines and they run it through. Then they have to look at the data. Then that data goes to the person that's going to interpret and see that data and see if that matches the thresholds. So it's a long process. It's not as simple as just throwing it in a machine and getting results right away.
Who do we think that was that asked that question? I just texted KSBY. It was not them. And I wouldn't think it was them. I bet it was the Trib. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing it was the Trib.
Accurate readings and then the analyzing of it. So we've been meeting with them daily as they get results, and we will continue to do that. Matter of fact, they have another meeting this morning.
Sheriff Parkinson, do you plan to dig up any areas of the backyard and or move the white van and drive?
That's a good question.
Underneath that?
We plan to, well, I'll say this, we will dig anywhere that the evidence shows us. And that's why we utilize GPR to analyze that. That structure's been through over the years a lot of different, add-ons. It's kind of, how do I put it? If you've ever walked in a house that's had a bunch of add-on rooms, most of the time you can tell. That backyard, as you see from, must be that photo. It's a small backyard, and it's because building came, and I'm using my hand to demonstrate where the house is. As that house moved out, that backyard shrank. And I would probably say it's 15, 20 by 30. And I was surprised. The first time I've ever been back there was Wednesday morning. I've seen photos, but we have not been back to that backyard in my tenure. So it's a very small area back there to search. But also, as you can see, it's quite crowded with stuff. And every time we do a scan, we have to relocate all that stuff so we get a clean scan. We're at the operator of the GPR's will to tell us what they see or what they want, and it's our job to accommodate. So, at any given time, you've probably seen we've had, anywhere from 5 to 10 investigators out there, because they are the moving company for the GPR. Whatever they want is what we want, and they know clearly that our direction is you will not. We will do anything it takes to make sure that we have done a complete, thorough search.
And one more question about searches. You said on the Up+Adam podcast that the Sheriff's Office completed another search since Flores' conviction. When was that search? What was the scope? And what brought that about?
Well, the location I'm not going to disclose, because as I mentioned earlier, until we have Kristin, everything is still wide open. The search was based on investigative leads and electronic information that we had obtained through search warrants.
Okay.
But beyond the location and such, it's not unusual. I think if you look at the history of this case, just since my time, 15 years, we had all kinds of search locations that we did. Extensive ones tended to be more on the radar for people. You guys heard about it, public saw it, and it was in the news. But we did a lot of searches, but we have not divulged a lot of search locations even to this point, because we don't know if we're going to go back there. And until we recover Kristin, everything is still open. And even if we searched it once, we might have missed an area 10 feet away from it. We're not talking about a large area, as in Kristin's body. We're talking about a large area to search. So we really will not provide information as to specifically where we searched. It was simply that, yes, we have searched.
Sheriff, it sounds like you're talking about returning to a location, like Ruben's home could theoretically be searched once again.
Absolutely. Anything
That's got to be Dave Alley, KCOI.
Kristin's been moved, and we don't know how many times she's been moved and to where she's moved. And so just because somebody's house was searched doesn't mean that we're not going back there, because she could have been moved back there thinking that it's a safe place. We don't know. We obviously have not received cooperation from the Smarts, and so where she is now, we don't know.
Sheriff Parkinson, can you explain the investigation that's also happening over at the neighboring residence on East Branch Street and how that ties in?
Yes, I'll tell you, we have a search warrant for the neighboring house, exterior, not interior. The residents are extremely cooperative. The property owner is extremely cooperative and has been for some time. The search on that area is to have clean access to the other side of the fence, which is soil, where we take readings. We would have had full cooperation to do that, but it's a policy to get a search warrant just in case something changes down the road where, somebody says, no, I didn't give full permission. A search warrant covers that. So the search warrant had nothing to do with their level of cooperation, because they have been extremely cooperative with us. As a matter of fact, the soil has been sampled there on that side of the fence over the last couple of years. And that was based on their consent.
And is Susan at this point considered a person of interest, or is she allowed to leave the state or the area at all as a part of this search warrant?
I would say to the first part, yes, she's a person of interest, as always has been. As far as her ability to leave, no, we have no lawful reason to detain her at this point, so we can't control that.
Thank you.
Can you speak on the statute of limitations for any charges that can still be brought against either Ruben or Susan in this case?
Well, I think an example of that is what we did when we prosecuted Paul. We prosecuted Ruben as an accessory. Obviously, you saw that. There was parts that could be introduced in Paul's case in chief by the San Luis DA's office, and there was stuff that could not be introduced in Ruben's case. So The fact is that she can still be prosecuted as an accessory if we can make that link, just like we did with Ruben. The part on Ruben, he can't be tried twice for the same thing. So unless there's another charge, it's double jeopardy. He was acquitted, and so unless there's another charge determined or more evidence that says, we can prove that he did, X, we can't. But I kind of leave that up to the DA's office, and if we uncover more information and there's a prosecutable case, then I am quite convinced they will prosecute.
Sheriff, can you clarify Detective Cole's role? I mean, I know he retired a couple years ago, but is he back on the case as lead detective, or exactly what's his involvement now officially?
Sure. I didn't agree to let Detective Cole leave, and not that means much, except that he's done an outstanding job. You gotta remember the toll these types of cases take on the investigators. And I'm talking about a deputy sheriff on the street that goes to a domestic violence call that sees somebody that's been victimized over and over again. They carry that with them. But now when you're talking about a child, and Kristin truly was still a child, is gone, and you're in charge, and you got the sheriff who's got 4 layers of chain of command between that investigator and you, and the sheriff's calling you, going to your office, having you come and brief on progress. It's a lot of pressure, it truly is. And there's a lot of emotion goes, and Clint's had a full career. He picked his jump off spot after the conviction and said, I just need to take a break. Fortunately for me and fortunately for us, he called and said he wanted to come back part-time to continue working on some of the cold cases that he's working on. So I gladly brought him back, and he picked up pretty much where he had left off. I kind of gave him a long vacation, but part-time, generally equates to 20 hours a week. But there's times that Clint is working more hours in 1 week than our regular investigators when he's on something that he needs to continue on. So I don't know how long I'm going to keep him this time, but he's going to see, everything he can through and make sure he's in a good spot.
So is he lead detective, or is there a role of somebody else lead detective? Or
He is still lead detective. When he retired, a new detective was selected to do that. That detective had left or been out, and so that's when we brought Clint back. But Clint is the lead detective. But as you saw, most of the people out there at Susan's house were all part of our major crimes unit, and so we very much take the team approach. It's not one person that does this, and so everybody is assigned a responsibility, and they kind of divide and conquer that as a team.
Sheriff, just going back to the search warrants, can you tell us if there are any eyewitness accounts or interviews that led to those being processed?
I just to clarify, when you say eyewitness accounts, somebody saw something happen at the house
or anything, yeah.
I would say that there was information that was derived from what we have to deem as a witness. So yes, there was some information, but not in the context of I saw this happen. They contributed to it by information that they provided it that makes them a witness.
And this was new information?
So there was what I'd have to classify as a witness, non-law enforcement personnel that provided information that helped.
Thank you.
Sheriff Parkinson, can you share what's being done inside the home? I know GPR and soil testing is being done outside, but what are you guys doing inside?
I'll share that first. A search warrant means that you go through everything, papers, any device that we can find and locate. So that's kind of that, when I said earlier, kind of divide and conquer. You might have people that are just in charge of one thing, and that's all they're doing is searching that one thing. But inside specifically, so you have a full search of every single item in the house, inside out. We did do GPR inside the house as well. Obviously, you wouldn't see that because it's inside. Any location that we wanted to, that we could access, and there was a reason behind it, GPR.
And for the team testing the soil and receiving those updates, are you able to share at all if those updates have been fruitful or what you're learning from those updates?
Great question.
I'd say yes, they're fruitful. Yes, that we're getting some positive results, and consistent with what the science tells them.
Wow, that might be the biggest thing we've learned.
Have continued to focus on.
And are they testing the same spots or locations that have previously been tested?
When you say previously been tested,
have they done the soil testing previously during previous search warrants?
No. No soil testing has been previously done to my knowledge. The previous testing to the warrant was off the florist's property. It was not on their property. So the evidence let us trail to the property. And so now with the warrant, we're getting it all throughout the property, and then they're analyzing to determine, is it strong, is it weak, what is it? Much like you would do any other soil test for oil, in the ground. So, but this is specific to human decomposition.
When you say positive results, are you saying that they are getting results that they as scientists, based on their science, believe are consistent with human remains presence?
Good question. Yes, that's the question, baby.
Sheriff Parkinson,
that was the question. Man, I just got chills. That was the question. That's the breaking news. Whoever's in that room and asked that question, that's it. Good job.
That's under peer review influence the sheriff's office ability to secure a search warrant at this time?
Well, I would say this is a piece of the puzzle, and it's just like witnesses, they help give us the answers and tie it together. Certainly, when it comes to the samples, it's a piece of it. It helps guide us, just like GPR guides us. GPR is not conclusive. It tells us there's something strange there. And if you may recall, this was introduced during the trial, during testimony on the GPR. The operator identified locations of anomalies. In the particular place that we believe Kristin was, that was the anomaly that he identified that he was most interested in based on the results he saw. But remember, GPR is showing unusual things. It's showing things that that are of interest. It's not necessarily evidence. It is leading us to that path. And so when you talk about soil, I look at it much the same. It's leading us in a direction, but it's not proof necessarily that we could only rely on. We have to rely on other stuff.
Sheriff Parkinson, given the community's intense interest in this case, what can the community do to best support your deputies and maintain the integrity of the investigation?
I would say a couple things. Number one, obviously report anything
that's Alex Farrington.
Find unusual.
That was Alex.
Extremely important.
I love it.
That any new information that might come in. I mean, we have people out there that have sat on information. We have people out there that saw something and they just didn't supply it because they didn't think it was worthwhile. So anything that they see that they can present to us would be extremely beneficial. Second, I would say, don't jump to conclusions. I've reminded the Smarts of this because it's been such a roller coaster ride with them, that when we go to do something and I tell them we're going to do something, manage your expectations, because we don't know, and we've been through this so many times where we're riding that coaster up and then all of a sudden it drops off. And so I have to kind of keep reminding them of that, and even though they know that intuitively, it's easy to get your hopes up. And so the public is much the same. Manage your expectations. We're doing everything systematically, and if it doesn't met the results we want, we have done a great job of changing the direction and moving on to something else and pursuing that till the end. And that's what we'll continue to do. Ideally, we recover Kristin. Ideally, we would have had Kristin a long time ago. But ideally we recover Kristin, and then we can bring some peace to the family and by recovering Kristin. But the reality is we're not in the business of dropping our head and walking away. That's not our mission. That's not what we intend to do. So it's managing our own expectations as well. When you hear something, you get excited, and all of a sudden it ends up into nothing. And so that's kind of the case. So the public has to do the same thing. They might believe something, they might think that it's true, but it's not provable and it's not true. And so it saves us a tremendous amount of time when we don't get a whole bunch of information from people that have their own theories. We have very good investigators, and they've done an amazing job piecing things together, and we just got to let them do their job and be patient. And trust me that nobody involved in this case wants Kristin brought home more than we do. And we're going to do everything possible to do that. And that's the peace of mind they should have, is that this has continued. It did not end at conviction, and it will continue until we absolutely have nowhere to go or we find Kristin.
Sheriff Parkinson, it looks like there were tarps hung up this morning on the scene. Can you tell us the purpose or significance of those tarps?
Good question.
Do you have a camera out there?
I have a reporter out there.
Well, as you know from the Rubens house search, there's certain things that we want to shield from view. So I think it's probably safe to say that what we're doing is sealing it from public view. And it's not something that's being hidden. It's the fact that we don't want people guessing what we're doing. We need to work in peace, and that's what they're doing now.
And can you tell us anything else about the search today? What time it will continue? How long?
They're doing a lot of work and prep. I can say that the way that the search warrant like this works is exactly the way it works with Rubens. We get an order from a judge to go search a piece of property. We're looking for something that is unusual. In Rubens' case, we found something unusual that we felt was supported by GPR. We have to get then what's called a piggyback warrant. We got to get another search warrant. A lot of these cases will end in multiple search warrants. So you got to pause. Investigators got to go get a new search warrant giving us permission to do something else more intrusive than a normal search warrant. So a search warrant on value, and this is something is a misnomer. People always ask, well, why did 96 they just tear up all the concrete? Well, that's not the way a warrant works. The judge is giving you permission to do certain things. You have to find probable cause to do the next step. Naturally, we don't want somebody coming in and just destroying an entire house without any cause. And so it requires a step-by-step process. And in this particular case, you're going to see some delays, possibly like you did with Rubens. There was delays that we had the house. We had to wait half a day because we had to author another search warrant, we had to get it signed, and then you have to plan what you're doing, what activity is that. So
if there's any digging, that would require another piggyback warrant?
Yes.
Sheriff, I got to follow up. There was a couple questions about the fruitful testing results. Does that? It sounds like you believe either Kristin the remains may still be there, or were there at one time?
Correct.
Sure.
Well, let me say one other part of that, Dave, is that we believe that based on what we're looking at evidence-wise, scientific evidence, that a human remains were there at one time or still there. So we can't call it Kristin, but we think there's
that's huge
support.
Also, did he just say he would need another warrant
Back
to
in
dig?
2014, some, I guess, third-party rogue people had done similar soil testing for human decomposition, or had VAST. Does that have any? And he came up with.
Oh my God, Ian's doing his chapstick. I love it. He must have needed it.
At that time.
He's so funny with his chapstick. I love that guy.
Results that they came up with
Straight throws up the chapstick.
No, and I'll tell you why. First, Dr. Bass is an expert in soil. They used a similar method where they used a canine Unfortunately, the canine was not certified, which is a requirement that we have to divulge to a judge. And two, the rumor was that he was identifying it as human remains. The factual evidence from the report said it was essentially inconclusive. It could be, it could not be. I think, again, the science has advanced. People that have been focused on it, that are experts working in that field, have been teamed up and working on this, and so it's different. It's same in theory, but it's different from what it is today. So that didn't aid us at all. What we have is results, and so I would say for me, you can't go to a judge and say we think, based on the science that says there has to be some fact that we can articulate to the judge that is supported through either testimony or something to support that. And so I think as the time has evolved, I think that's what this group has been focused on. And that's why we're in a different situation, even though there's similarities to the way it happened back then.
Can I clarify the timeline? You said positive results, the scientists show positive results consistent with human decomposition. The positive results that led to this search warrant and additional positive results as part of this search this week.
Yes.
In the past 2 days, you've had additional positive results that confirm that.
Yes. So I guess the easiest way to explain it, at least the way it was explained to me, Chris, is that you get your results, and where they sit on, and I'll call it a spectrum, so that's not a scientific term, that's just my term. Where it sits, if it's maybe, let's call it mid-range, you could say that, well, it could be this, it could be that, maybe similar to what Dr. Bass discovered. When it's up here, that's when the results become more. So it's kind of like saying, well, there's a 50% chance, or there's a 90% chance. And that's what the science supports. So the kind of the short answer to your question, even though it didn't sound short, is that on the opposite wall or property, they had positive results. So the mission is to soil test on the property and find out where that source was. It's not just in every part of the soil, so they could test one area and come back and there's like nothing. And then they find another where it's, wow, this is positive, very strong. So that's kind of what's helping lead us with this. And again, it's a piece of the puzzle. We try to use as many, I guess, sciences available to us as possible, or technology too.
How strong are the positive results you've gotten from this current testing?
I don't know, and I couldn't quantify it because it hasn't not been quantified that way. I'm trying to explain it to where people understand it. So they're the ones who tell us it's very strong, very positive, and that's the way we've kind of operated over the last couple of years with them.
And Sheriff, just looking at the pictures you've released, obviously what appears to be the garage is a consistent slab. The backyard appears to have bricks. Would removal of bricks without destroying concrete be something that you are able to do within the scope of the current warrant?
Yeah, so you're talking about this brick pattern, being able to pull up the bricks and test the soil? Absolutely. Obviously, you have
Great question, Alex.
Hardened concrete.
That was our Alex Farrington.
Structure, I believe we have all the records on the house. It was pre Kristin's disappearance, as I recall.
Great question.
As the GPR operator tells us, scientist that operates it, he's obviously educated and skilled in that area. Going through concrete for GPR is not an issue. So if we see an anomaly underneath that layer of concrete, he should see that anomaly on his evaluations. And again, that process is, I can tell you again, in his example with Rubens, when he came out, he did all of his stuff. He had to go back to his hotel room and then analyze everything. And the next morning is when he came back and we met with him and he said, here are the locations that I see anomalies. This is where I suggest you check. But this location, which ended up being where we believe Kristin was buried because of the human blood and decomp, that location is what I'm most interested in. These other ones, we have to check them out. So anything that they might find, if it was, soil samples, removing bricks, that's fairly non-invasive. But if we had to hole or a saw cut, cement cut that any areas of concrete, we have to have a probable cause to say we think there's something there. And so that's why it's very slow and methodical.
Let me ask directly, at this time as you stand there, are you aware of any new anomalies being discovered by that ground radar since this search has begun?
What do you mean? Was there any anomalies?
Yeah.
Yes. And we're
He answered that
focused
already.
on those and identifying what they are.
This is huge. That's
probably with
huge.
DVR is that you might pick up a sewer line underneath. That's an anomaly technically. Then he has to analyze to say, it's consistent with a.
There's been probably like 30 questions. Only like 5 of them have been good.
So yeah, they find anomalies, and that's their job.
But
they
those
have to
good ones were
analyze and say,
very good.
This is the size of a sewer.
KSBY Carson, you did a great question too.
Or in-ground plumbing, stuff like that. So it takes some work, that's for sure.
All right, is that it?
Sheriff, just one other clarification. Back
Alex
in
Farrington.
2021, Susan gave an impromptu interview with Megan Healy of KSBY.
I remember
she
that.
mentioned that she'd never spoken to you. It sounded like maybe she was open to that with the presence of an attorney. Are you open to direct communication with?
Good question, dude.
With that?
Oh, we've always been. I don't believe that statement. We tried to talk to her numerous times, and normally it ends with some choice words. We attempted to talk.
Great question, Alex.
On Wednesday.
Up+Adam correspondent Alex Farrington.
Dialogue, but it's
W's in the chat.
it's been consistent that way with the family, across the board. But no, she's never been willing to sit down with us. Never been willing to communicate with us, short of very, very short things. And most of the time, it's not about the case. It's about us.
I should ask this question. It's the obvious one. Have you tried to go back to Paul and ask him flat out, where's Kristin, again recently? I just wondered.
Yes, we've talked to Paul several times. Paul, as
Great question.
you're probably aware, is going through the appeal process. He's exhausted. He's exhausted the Court of Appeals, upheld it. California Supreme Court reviewed and refused to hear it. And I think he's got a writ that goes to the court. And my understanding is once that writ has been reviewed, and if they continue to uphold it, which we suspect they will, his appeals are over. So maybe that will change, that he's willing to talk to us, but it's always a part of our investigation.
Good question.
Sheriff Parkinson, if you and your team were to find something that would justify getting the other warrant to start digging, is that something that your team would do while you're still on site with the
Yes, right?
investigation, or would you have to go back at a different time?
Great question, but I think
we're not leaving that house until we've exhausted everything.
Yes, baby.
The answer is yes, we have a search warrant to be there. We find something, we go get another search warrant specific to what we're doing and what our activity is. If we wanted to rip out 2 walls, we're going to play it safe. We're going to get a judge to give us authority to do that, but we're going to maintain control of the house until that warrant is specific, because we still have a search warrant. It doesn't replace the previous search warrant. It's a specific addition to that area, just like a addendum to the warrant in a sense, because you don't typically have to recreate the whole warrant. It's from X point on that you have to explain to the judge of what you want to do, why you want to do it, and what evidence you have that might support that.
And Sheriff, what evidence would warrant, potentially at the end of this investigation, would warrant an arrest of Susan?
I would say it's hard to say that because it's probably, I can imagine all kinds of things. If obviously we found Kristin, that could warrant arrest and prosecution. But I would consult, if we reached a level of evidence, let's say without Kristin, that I believed, and our investigators believe, reached that threshold of prosecution, I would meet with DA Dow, have that discussion. Ultimately, that would be his decision. We have authority to arrest, but he has authority over prosecution. And so we would have to we'd have to literally be comfortable that he was ready to move forward. And I can tell you, even going back to Paul and Ruben's original arrest, I had a ton of dialogue with DA Dow and trying to prep them and ensure that when we made an arrest, an arrest is going to prosecute, because it wasn't. There's no value in arresting somebody if the DA says it's not enough, I'm not going to prosecute that. They just get released, and we've wasted our time. So it would have to be an evaluation on what is actually present, and is the totality of it meet that threshold that he can prosecute it, and then it was ultimately his decision before we did anything.
Then one last question about the Megan Healy interview.
I thought you said the last one was last one.
Are you aware of Susan's claim to have a manuscript or book about her experiences? And if such a thing exists, would something like that be subject to the scope of the current warrant?
Yes, if an item like that existed and it had
great question, Alex,
of specific to the case, yes, that could be that would be part of a warrant that we could seize that item. And certainly when I say the division of duties and the focus on certain things, I mean, it takes a lot. I mean, think about your own house and where all your paperwork is. It's going to take a while to go through, particularly when you're not familiar with what you're looking at and trying to decipher, read everything, find out if there's value. So it takes quite a bit.
It's just a really off the wall, but good questions, Alex.
But there is definitely a focus for anything in writing, in that respect.
All right. Are we good? All right.
Last question is, search over today? Will it be continuing through the weekend?
Great question. I don't have a great answer. The bottom line is, if the evidence takes us to the tomorrow, to the next day, we're prepared for that. And I don't really know the answer to that, because we haven't reached that point yet. We're focused on stuff that, might lead us to future days. It might end it for what we've either seen and collected to that point. So it's kind of hour by hour. I get briefed on what they had. I mean, just before this, I got another briefing, and it's all day, and it could be, hey, we're about at the end, and then it's like, nope, we're just went another direction. So that's why we kind of anticipated, that we could be rolling through the weekend. We just don't know yet, and everybody that's there is committed to know that their weekend doesn't begin on Friday. It's whenever the job is done, and they'll get their break. Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you for coming.
All right, let's pull out of it.
We'll certainly have something when we conclude our warrant.
All right, there we go. Let's pull out of that. Wow, that was quite a press conference. Sheriff Ian Parkinson, live from the Sheriff's Department. The very first question out the gate, I'm guessing that was the Tribune. I almost want to go back to that. Okay, I want to go back. This was the very first question that was asked. And really, I don't know who this was. It might have been the Tribune. I'm guessing it was, because you have to ask yourself, would it be an out-of-towner media person who would likely get butthurt that we got the exclusive interview and they didn't? But listen to this question. Tell me if you think this is the Tribune.
Thursday morning, an interview you did with a local radio host / podcaster was dropped. It was called an exclusive interview after a lot of local media was told we weren't going to get anything else from you guys.
Wah.
What do you have to respond about that? And why was that given to him?
Well, as you know, being in the media, that I don't have a responsibility to do any interviews, and my intention was not to do interviews. That was the message I gave to our PIO, Adamm Montiel, who I happen to know called me and caught me at a time that I was actually available, and I agreed to talk to him. If you listen to it, it was very, very benign, and it was about following what we had already put out in a press release. So the short answer is, I chose to do it.
Love it.
Sheriff Parkinson?
Yes, that was so good. And then there was one other question where they really just kind of referred to something he said on the show, because he did kind of drop some news on our show yesterday where he said there was another warrant that was served that was pretty substantial, maybe was the word. And then somebody asked the question, say, it was another thing you asked, you talked to Adamm Montiel about. So there you go, boom. We got mentioned 2 times in this. And the very first question, that was such a waste of a question that whoever that was, they should be ashamed of themselves, because, there's so many good questions that came out of that, what about almost an hour of a press conference, and you're going to waste the first one on that. How about something about digging? How about something about, have you had any results yet? Carson from KSBY asked several great questions. Our very own Up and Adam correspondent Alex Farrington there asked some fantastic questions. So there you go. This is a special edition of Up and Adam. We do have a regular Friday show, but I wanted to bring you this live as possible, right? It's not live because it's a podcast, but this just happened. Is that website talking about the show? Go ahead, pull that up.
I think there was some frustration in the room that Sheriff Parkinson had spoken to a podcaster, and I think that the extended Q&A was, look, just from a reporter's perspective, it's an opportunity for the sheriff to say, hey, look, I'm going to answer every one of your questions. I don't care if it's going to take 30, 40 minutes. I'm going to answer every question. But one thing that is abundantly clear thematically from this is that this is an ongoing search right now.
All right, we can pull out of that. I thought I heard them talking about us. Okay, Alex Farrington, Up and Adam correspondent, was at the press conference. He is on the phone right now. Alex, my goodness, great job. Up and Adam correspondent on the scene. You asked some great questions, dude.
I've tried my best to channel my inner Adamm Montiel.
Man, speaking of Adamm Montiel, who is this fool that got mentioned in the first question? Now, I've been texting from someone in the local agency back and forth. I was like, that wasn't your person, was it? And they're like, no, it definitely wasn't. Was it the Tribune? I'm curious who asked the very first question out the gate. Someone's butthurt.
Yeah. I think they were bummed that you had the exclusive. I thought the sheriff did a great job of explaining why.
Me too.
And boiled it down to just he wanted to. You caught him at a good time, and obviously it was a crazy day for both of you, but the stars aligned and the timing worked out. So
I don't know if you thought of your questions ahead of time. All 3 of your questions, or maybe 4, they were really good, Alex. I mean, you really got some good stuff from him.
Yeah, I was pretty gratified. The room kind of got a little icy there right at the beginning, but I thought everybody had good questions. It was a very, very respectful and positive. Lots of information. I was worried it was going to be a lot of things that he couldn't comment on, but he was able to clarify a number of things, and it was great to be a part of it.
One thing that is interesting to me, Chris Lambert obviously has been a part of this. I'm sure he got tipped off that the warrant was being served because he was there literally when they're showing her, and then she does the middle finger to Chris Lambert, which was an absolutely epic picture. But someone in my comments with the interview that we had, the exclusive interview with Sheriff Ian Parkinson, said, why would just someone like Adamm get this when Chris Lambert's done so much? Well, here's the thing. Nobody has worked closer with the sheriff's department than Chris Lambert. If Chris Lambert wanted a conversation, I can't imagine he wouldn't be granted one. And here Chris was in the audience and not a question from him. Did you find that odd? Did you expect him to maybe ask something?
He actually did. He did ask one question.
Oh, shoot. I must have missed it. I thought I would have known his voice.
Yeah,
what did he ask?
He was clarifying timeline issues. And actually, Chris was right to me, to my left. So the sheriff immediately pointed. I thought at Chris when that first question came out, and obviously that wasn't Chris. But yeah, he was very... he was just taking it all in. I can't say enough about his level of professionalism and the grace that he carries himself with throughout all this.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's amazing to watch.
Yeah, well, look, I didn't even notice that, so I'm glad you corrected me there. What a press conference. I think we learned a lot of things. I think, at about 30, 40 questions, there was about 5 or 6 that really were well done. You were like 3 or 4 of those, but someone, I think it was Carson from KSBY, who asked about using the word positive. Have you gleaned anything fruitful? And then, somebody followed up with the decomp, and he seemed to confirm that. I was surprised he confirmed that. I think that is, if any headline comes out of that press conference, it's that Positive for decomp in Susan's backyard. That is a bona fide headline. And then somebody else asked a question we learned about. They would need another warrant, but it would be pretty seamless. So I mean, it's funny because I'm on like some lawn crime kind of thing watching it. And I was back and forth on KSBY watching like comments and stuff. And people are like, oh, there's like no updates. I'm like, are you listening? Like there was a couple little nuggets in there that if you were listening carefully and comprehensively, you gleaned from that.
Yeah, and I love that he made it clear that they are not leaving until they have exhausted every legal action that they can do. That it's not going to be, oh, well, we forgot to do this, or oh, we forgot to do that. Obviously, he's got a great team working under him investigating this, and obviously they have the benefit of the years and years of hive mind that is largely due to Chris's hard work of all kinds of people asking all kinds of questions. Yeah. And, I'm gratified to see these steps. I know there was reference to tarps going up.
Right.
And he just briefly mentioned, to preserve what they're doing. He didn't elaborate any more on that, but it's gratifying that the work is in fact continuing today.
Yeah, very good. Well, man, you just, you lit it up in there. You did a great job. You were right up there. I mean, I know you're not a journalist by day, but you have journalist tendencies through your blood. You're very smart. You're very good at what you do. And honestly, the world of journalism could have, benefit from more full-time people like you in it. But for you to be there in that room, you did everyone a service, certainly this show, but you did everyone a service by asking really thoughtful, comprehensive questions, as only maybe like 4 or 5 questions beyond you did. So great job, Alex Farrington.
I'm doing my best to learn from the best.
I love you, man. Well, look, thanks again for connecting here. I can't thank you enough, dude.
Of course, Adam. And as always, stay tight and prayers for Opa.
Stay tight, my man. Publishing now. And thank you for listening. Thank you so much for being Up and Adam.